this video I'm going to discuss how to use natural light to achieve a strong portrait. I will use examples that I produced while on assignments, as well as using portraits from my personal essays. The jobs that I did for magazines, newspapers, corporate clients and NGOs were always on location. I never worked in a studio and never used assistants. I can't remember a shoot when there wasn't a time pressure involved. At best I would only have 10 or 15 minutes with the person, because either their time was limited or the portrait was part of a bigger story and we had to keep moving on. This is the first video of a two-part series on using natural lighting. So let's say that you need to take a photograph of someone and there's no opportunity to take studio equipment, backdrops or anything else that's difficult to carry. It's just you and the few things that you can manage to haul along with you. Your camera gear, perhaps a portable flash, a reflector and your tripod. I'll take a look at various scenarios and discuss the decisions that I made. Where possible, I'll use the actual tear sheets from the publications. Often over-planning a shoot closes down options in one's head because one is just focused on a particular outcome. The restrictions in any given situation often force one to come up with innovative ideas on the spot. When doing a portrait, you are faced with a number of questions. Above all, your goal should be to communicate something about that person to the viewer. Who are they as a person, or what is it about them that attracts your attention? By working this through in your head, you're shifting the interaction between you and the subject into the personal space. So in order to create this connection, you have to bring in that pesky aspect of communication. So while part of your mind is grappling with thoughts about lighting and placement, you need to chat and put the subject at ease. Try to get them talking about themselves so you can learn more about them. There are more mundane questions as well, like what is the purpose of the picture? What sort of look are you trying to achieve, formal, relaxed? And do you need to include environmental information? Then there are quite a few questions about the subject that might help you to prepare. Research is always a useful starting point. Other factors that will alter how you approach a shoot include age, skin tone. You don't want a dark-skinned person wearing a bright t-shirt sitting in direct sunlight. The tonal range is just too great, so you have to be aware of those extremes. Also, are they introverted or extroverted? Are they photogenic? Pretty privilege is definitely a thing. There's no doubt that good looks facilitate social interaction, and they also influence how people respond to a photograph. Environmental portraiture is a term that implies that you are bringing other elements into the frame in order to provide a context for the subject to inhabit. If you have control over what time of day you can photograph, then your chances of creating a decent portrait have already greatly increased. A number of factors will determine where you wish to photograph them. Perhaps the subject is a painter and you then want to photograph in the studio with their work. By adding secondary elements that complement the subject, you are often increasing the complexity of the lighting setup. For instance, if you add something that is brightly lit, say a tree or something in the bright sunlight, you'll probably then need to have light on the subject that has a similar intensity. Shadows can normally be recovered to some extent in post-production, but blown out highlights are basically lost and they almost always look ugly. Once you've established a balance of light between the important elements within the frame, you can go on to consider other factors. In this assignment, I had the luxury of time for planning. I needed to show the subject a town planner, as well as the buildings in the area of the city in which he was working. I wanted to exclude the busyness of a street level shot, so eventually I found this low rooftop in which I could isolate the buildings in the background. I worked out where the sun would fall early in the morning and where I was going to place the subject. So having done all the planning work, I was then able to just check the weather report, make a time for the subject to come in, and he was literally there for 5 or 10 minutes, and then he was off to his next appointment. Early on in my career, one of the biggest mistakes was thinking that interesting backgrounds were the key to making striking portraits. It was probably because I was extremely shy and wanted to avoid stumbling through a conversation. An impressive setting can help to make a decent photo, but more often it becomes just a picture of a person in front of an interesting thing. So even if you have the subject for a very short time, you have to take control of your interaction and to keep their focus on what you're trying to achieve in that time. There have been quite a few times when I've had to produce a portrait on the fly, using whatever lighting is available at that time. This assignment was to fly down in the morning to a coastal town, photograph a surfer who was attacked and bitten by a shark, and return the same day. So early morning or late afternoon light were out of the question. During the interview, I realized that the first prize would be to photograph the surfer showing his scars, include the damaged surfboard, and also maybe show the beach where the attack happened. This wasn't an easy task given that the light was already quite high in the sky. Some of my shots showed him looking out to sea, but they seemed a little stiff. As soon as he looked at me, it became a bit more personal. The only problem is the deep shadows under their eyes. I'm not a big fan of reflectors or fill-in flash because I feel that the images almost always land up having a slightly unnatural look. I think in this shot I added fill flash about 2 or 2.5 stops under the natural light. So given the circumstances, I had to compromise on something. The newspaper needed all the relevant information, so for me that was the most important, and then the eyeshadows were the obvious minus. You'll notice that this shot provides a whole lot of information which serves its purpose, but what it doesn't do is give the viewer any idea of who the surfer is as a person, apart from the real basics that he's a fit young man with good hair that got attacked by a shark. In the case of this assignment, I needed to illustrate a story about a woman called Sonia Geneva, who was the first woman to become an atomic reactor operator in South Africa. There was another factor that was important in the story, and that was to show that the reactor, called Kubig plant, was situated very close to Cape Town. You can see Table Mountain on the right of the photograph. I suggested that we walk from the reactor control room and around the security perimeter, hoping that I'd find a decent location. I was thinking it's already 11 o'clock in the morning, the light is really harsh, and I don't know much about this person. Perhaps he's shy or fairly tense in front of the camera. My only hope was to set up a rapport and keep things very light so I could get some movement and energy into the image and avoid getting a result where you have dark eyeshadows as in the previous image. The end result was a spontaneous, energetic portrait, but only because I was lucky that she had a nice face and was confident and friendly. So my main goal during this assignment was to get all the elements in the frame and then create a light-hearted moment to pull the whole thing together. This photograph lands up exposing a little more about the subject's personality than the previous one. Photographers in different parts of the world are faced with different challenges when they work outside. The sunlight in Northern Europe or America is often soft and diffuse. The sunlight is having to travel further through the atmosphere and is refracted by dust and moisture particles, so it becomes less direct. With this light you can achieve a really nice soft balance between the highlights and the shadows, but at the same time have a sense of a directional light. The negative is that in places like the UK, your chances of getting a sunny day are minimal. In locations that have harsh light, unless you have fine cloud cover, you usually have to catch the light at sunrise or sunset if you want a soft finish. These 3 images show how attractive this magic hour lighting can be. In these 4 examples, there are various degrees of soft cloud cover, allowing me to show surrounding detail without being limited by the intense sunshine. There is an alternative that you can utilize the light's strong directional nature in order to make an impactful image. These 5 examples utilize very linear light using different approaches. The only way to explore the options arising from this light is to move the subject about until you find a dynamic setup. This guy had to be photographed in his pool, but it was already late in the day, and obviously there was a huge contrast between the shadows under his eyes and the bright background. I tried various things, but in the end I resorted to sunglasses to solve the problem. I hope that you found this video interesting. I'll release the second and final part of this natural light exploration in the near future. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Is it over yet?
This is good. It really is.
What are they?
Well,
and find out what the future holds in store.
Is it over yet?